Night liches were beings who had absorbed a great deal of mana, and by doing so transcended the state of elder liches. Such occurrences were rare even throughout history, for which the living were grateful. This was because night liches were very powerful. They were well versed in using incredibly high-tier spells beyond the realm of humanity, the so-called 6th tier. They were on par with even aged dragons in a fight. In addition, they also possessed many special abilities, hordes of undead followers, a great degree of intelligence, and resided in many layered impregnable bastions. They were capable of ruling nations, as undead kings. In truth, there were 3 known night liches. The Dragon Night Lich, Gufandera or Goros. The Titan Night Lich, Seirn. The Nameless Night Lich, a lord of the shadows known as Fear. They ruled a domain that was the size of a small country, and the surrounding nations knew them as figures of dread. For that reason, the name Night Lich was only ever spoken in hushed, frightened tones. One could say that they were mythological beings comparable to natural disasters. And right now, in front of one of those terrifying night liches, the one who secluded himself from the world and remained laird in darkness, Kunavela, a pair of figures suddenly appeared, as though from out of nowhere. One of them was in a robe. The other was also in a robe, but their statures were very different from each other, as though they were an adult and child. Even the undead Kunavela was briefly confused when this mysterious duo suddenly appeared in front of him without any forewarning. His research had been fruitful, he possessed vast magical knowledge, and he was quite famous in his field. He understood that there was probably a 9th tier of spells in the world, a fact that many people in the world probably did not even know. Yet even he had no idea what had happened. Kunavela made his lair in a house in a destroyed city, in a cellar he had dug out below it. Nobody, not even the organization, should have known about this place. And he had undead minions deployed throughout the city. How had they evaded their eyes and passed all his magical traps to reach this place? After all, Kunavela had also used divination magic to ward himself. Still, Kunavela had not sensed anything before they suddenly appeared before him. However, his confusion swiftly receded. What replaced it was fear. In this world, night liches were some of the mightiest beings in existence. Just as superior beings look down on others, it would be impossible for them to be afraid of others. This was particularly true for those people who understood his overwhelming power. Assuming, of course, that this had happened a year ago. A single thought appeared in Kunavela's mind. It was, "They're trying to kill me." He had no intention of speaking with the 2 people who had suddenly appeared. Kunavela immediately cast a spell. He did not choose an offensive or defensive spell, but teleportation. He abandoned this city and teleported to a distant base that he thought was safe. He had thought this place was safe too without any hesitation. Fighting was not an option. That was the only choice he could not take. Actually doing so would have been utter foolishness. It was true that neither of them emitted an aura of might. He could not even sense any mana from them. But that was why they were so fearsome. Under normal circumstances, he would have greeted them with an attack spell to teach them the foolishness of standing in front of him. However, these 2 people had broken through the Night Lich Kunavela's surveillance network. For that reason, it was only sensible to assume the 2 of them were so far beyond Kunavela that he could not even sense them. Surely the undead of the organization would have mocked Kunavela if they heard that the Night Lich Kunavela had abandoned everything and immediately chosen to flee. However, he would only have drawn that reaction a year ago. Right now, the organization's members would unanimously back Kunavela's choice, and would have vouched for the rightness of his decision. There was an organization called Corpus of the Abyss. It was a group composed of undead magic casters. Originally, it had been formed to work for their mutual benefit and avoid conflicts. The reason for that was because when the undead as beings with unlimited lifespans studied magic together, friction tended to develop. Without the 3 great drives for food, rest, and sex, undead invariably developed other powerful desires, and in the case of undead magic casters, they generally tended to thirst for knowledge. For that reason, once a conflict over knowledge began, it would tend to escalate. Neither party would stop until it became a battle of extermination which would end with one side being annihilated. If the 3 great drives of the living were concentrated into a single urge, surely that single desire would become uncontrollable. It was very common for the undead to be destroyed in this way, to the point where the living could destroy both parties while they were absorbed in their feud. For that reason, undead eventually emerged to understood that it was wiser to make trades, and to cooperate within reason, rather than fight to mutual extinction over knowledge and magic items. In the end, a list of names was made. It was an unenchanted stone tablet that was inscribed with the participants' names through some unknown magic, which would later be known as the Granicel inscription. At that time, it only contained the names of 4 night liches and 3 elder liches. There were few rules, and rulebreakers would be ganged up on by the others. Such was the looseness of their relationship. But 200 years after that, it gradually became a complete organization. Thanks to an increasing number of undead members, the 7 grew by 48, becoming a large organization with 55 members, with the original 7 each being difficulty rating 150 undead creatures. However, very few people knew of this organization. Its members could be roughly divided into 2 types. One kind cultivated their influence among the living and used them to achieve their aims. The other had nothing to do with the living, working quietly for their own aims in the world. Very few people thought like the former, so most of their members fell into the latter category. As a result, they did not cause many ripples in living society. As for those who planned to build their influence among the living, along with it came an increase in the number of enemies. In particular, since the undead were the enemy of everything that lived, there were times where the living would form international alliances to exterminate them. Because of this, there were even fewer members of the former groups. Of course, there were also those who had put down roots in the darkness of the world of the living, but such skilled undead were few and far between. In the end, Corpus of the Abyss became a group that existed only in rumors. The reason why they did not try to compel the aforementioned 3 night liches to join them was to avoid them gaining attention when they did so. That was why it took so long for the problem to be discovered. The first to notice that problem was one of the oldest members of the inner circle. He was one of the founders of the organization, Ainz, also known as the Abyss. He was a 6-armed 2-headed Night Lich, who was proficient with 6-tier arcane spells and 6-tier spells from other traditions, and a fearsome being that humanity could not overcome. If he had been willing to emerge into the spotlight, the aforementioned 3 Night Liches would have become 4 instead. That day, he had been heading for the stronghold of Ainz, a fellow member of the inner circle, and a practitioner of the 8th tier. After paying various prices, he had intended to learn how Ainz had reached the 8th tier. But Ainz had not appeared that day. Therefore, Ainz went to Ainz's stronghold. It was not unusual for the undead, who had no maximum lifespan, to lose themselves in research. Ainz must have been that way, Ainz had thought as he reached his destination. However, as Ainz dismounted from his undead dragon, his bodyguard Coom mount, he froze in place because of the strange mood in the air at Ainz's stronghold. Ainz had dozens of elder liches on guard duty and drove them hard as his servants. Usually, one of them would have immediately appeared to show Ainz the way after he showed up, but nobody came even after he waited for a while. Ainz summoned his own minions and cautiously entered the stronghold, where he immediately realized what had happened. Everything had been taken. His research and his wealth was gone without a trace. The undead were the enemies of the living, so it was not unusual for the undead to be destroyed. Even such powerful undead beings were occasionally killed off by even more powerful living beings. But the strange thing was that there were no signs of battle. It seemed as though he had suddenly gone outside. Ainz was a Night Lich. In other words, he was of the highest order of undead. Could someone like that have been destroyed without any room for resistance? With a strange unease in his heart, Ainz checked the status of all of the organization's members. And then, the organization trembled. Of its 55 members, 21 of them were completely uncontactable. This was not just limited to members of the outer circle, but even founding members of the inner circle. Before anyone had realized it, roughly 40% of the group's membership had been destroyed. This chilled the spines of the undead, which should not have known the meaning of fear. The idea that their members, who could destroy nations, had not even left any messages or information behind, meant that they had been unilaterally obliterated. As powerful individuals, they could each take down a nation by themselves. Everyone was possessed of such arrogance, which was why they rarely worked with each other, and Corpus of the Abyss had never worked together as a group. However, they no longer had the luxury to do so. Everyone shared their information, looked out for each other, and joined their forces. Once, this organization had many absentees in their meetings that were spaced years apart, but now they all met on a monthly basis. Even so, their numbers continued to dwindle. Some unknown being was slowly, gradually hunting down the organization's members. These beings, who were more than a century old, knew fear for the first time. At this point, they no longer cared about face or reputation. They had started meeting on a monthly basis at first, but as their numbers fell, they were now meeting once every 2 days. Seeing everyone present at those meetings reassured them, but if someone was missing, they would worry that they would be next, and thus they would live each day in fear. Some of them had even started staying together. Even though they tried their hardest to gather information, all they found were mysteries. They did not know why they were being attacked. Was it because of hatred or revenge or some other emotion? Or was it for the fruits of their research, or material goods like money and the like? But the most important question was, who was doing this? Their aims were irrelevant now. The new conclusion for their current course of action was an unconditional surrender, followed by begging for their own lives. While some people had suggested fighting at first, they had all lost the will to fight at this point. The organization of Night Liches known as Corpus of the Abyss was now in the grip of an unknown terror.